How do you go about your imperfect images? I mean, like really imperfect. Heavily underexposed, the white balance is completely off, plus the image is soft in the face area. Should I ditch it? If you want to see me playing around with this image and coming up with some creative ideas, keep watching. Hi everyone, Kasia Zmokla from Digital Art Classes here. Welcome to my channel, where you will always find photo editing training and educational videos to help you grow as an artist and photographer. So for today I have picked one of my really old images. This photo was taken in 2012, so it is really old. I was learning basically how to use my camera, but I have created many of these sort of images when I had my friends, my colleagues posing for me. I have my colleagues helping out with lights, and I mean here by lights we had just one floor lamp and my friend Chris was holding the lamp to light up this portrait. So everything is basically imperfect, everything is wrong, but I still love these images. I love the energy of this picture, I love the composition. So I'm just keeping them on my hard drive, and I'm always super happy when I hear that raw editors such as Capture One improve their engines. So what I was able to do with this image in 2012 when I was working with Adobe Camera Raw, the final result, even with my today's skill, would be way less impressive because simply the technology was not there yet. So now I have Capture One and I was playing around with this image. Let me show you what I came up with. So this is the starting point, then I've been adjusting it in Capture One, so I have adjusted a little bit of white balance. I have been playing around a bit with color grading. I've adjusted a lot luminosity levels here. So this is what I was able to create in Capture One. After this, I wanted to jump over to Photoshop and play a bit with liquify tool. Why not? Typically I don't do this, but I got recently a bit tired with all these technical skills and sharpening and noise reduction and so on and so forth. So today, to introduce a bit of balance, as I would say, I will be really playful with this image and I will introduce some really strange things. So I took this image to Photoshop, and after few corrections I brought it back to Capture One, and here I was working a bit with gradients and white balance. So this is what I'm going to show you in today's video, how to bring basically this image, this raw file, move to Photoshop and then go back to Capture One and come up with such a result as this one. Before I jump into the creative process, I have a quick announcement. So very recently I have released a free masterclass in which I cover my workflow. Basically, I'm talking in detail about the 3 steps of my workflow in Capture One. So if you want to learn more about Capture One, if you want to know how to structure your work, check out the link down below under this video. The masterclass is completely free to join, no strings attached. Okay, so let's jump back to Capture One and let's begin. So this is my starting point. Let's first assess the image. So what I liked about this image and what made me to keep it through all these years from 2012 up till now is for sure the beautiful composition. So my first approach was to turn this image in black and white and play with the light and shadow. I love those dynamic lines created by light in this image. We have very deep shadows, there is very strong contrast, and we have quite strong light. Of course, the image needs a lot of adjustments in terms of luminosity, but the potential is there. So when I've tried the black and white approach, I've noticed that it is not really working focusing because the image is basically very, very imperfect, as I've mentioned at the very beginning of this video. So I've been focusing very quickly. She was changing the poses. The image was taken outdoor. I've been taking these images in Malta at the terrace. So you can see that the leg, her knee, is in focus. It is sharp. The image was taken with quite shallow depth of field, the aperture 3.5. So her face, first of all, is in the shadow, and it is far from perfect exposure. I don't even have detail in the eyelashes, and if I would be working with the HDR tool, if I try to just lift the shadow, I will be getting a lot of noise and there is not really much detail showing up. So I decided that going the black and white route is not going to work with this image. Plus, I quite like the warm light that is in this image. So I've been playing around in Capture One and I've decided to see what can be done. I had no plan for this image. I didn't know what will happen in the end. So let's move over to the second step and let's see what sort of adjustments I have performed here. So on my background layer, as you can see here, I've been playing around with levels. With curves, I haven't done anything. When it comes to levels, I have darkened the highlights. So if I just press and hold my Alt key, this is the image before applying levels and after. So you can see that after lifting blacks, this is what I've done on the HDR tool, I am getting a lot of grain here. I am getting a lot of noise, but I've decided, okay, this is the nature of this image. I'm not really going to fight it. I can try to reduce it a bit. I've been playing a bit around with the noise reduction tool. So this is what I got if I take a look before and after. So by default, Capture One will always load these three sliders inside the noise reduction tool at 50. So you have luminance at 50, details at 50, and color at 50. So I've decided to adjust it a bit. I went with luminance to 72 and I went down with detail to 39. So this helped a little bit, but I'm not even going to pretend that I've managed to get rid of the noise. I'm working on a retina display, and whenever you are assessing sharpness of your image or when you are correcting the noise, it is a good idea to take a look at 100% magnification level. Because I'm on retina, I'm looking at 200. So let's take a look at 100, and even now I can see still a lot of noise, a lot of grain at the back, but I decided to simply accept it. So let's focus on the model. Let's jump back to the exposure tab. So here I have pushed my bright tones. I have changed this adjustment here. So this introduced more contrast. This is before, this is the after, plus I have lifted the blacks. So if I press and hold on the black word, this is the image before and this is the image after. So before, a lot of contrast. I have basically the areas in the image when I'm completely crushing blacks. If I move over and check the exposure warning, I'm not getting any clipping in the whites, in the highlights, just a bit here, but it's fine. In terms of crushing blacks, I have a bit of warning here, but after lifting the blacks, this is what I'm getting now. If I check before, so before lifting blacks, it would look like this. So I've decided to introduce a little bit of this HDR adjustment, and this basically gave me the starting point for further work. So if I check here, I've changed as well white balance. So this is a really important adjustment in case of this image. So before you even start thinking about color grading, before you even start coming up with any ideas for color, it is important to get the white balance right, or at least correct it to your liking. So in this image, the shift is really massive. The initial value for Kelvin temperature, it was 2933, and I went all the way to 1299. I haven't touched the tint slider, but the shift in terms of the temperature in this image is really massive. But I wanted to have this color distinction between the hair, between the skin, and between the background. So let's take a look at color readouts. When I hover over this part here, we have 31 for the red, 32 for the green, 27 for the blue. So the background is cyanish, but there is still plenty of red, plenty of magenta. We have 31 for the red. When we move over the face, and now if we take a look at the color readouts, we have way more red, though the skin tones, they are looking almost grayish. And then we have the red hair. So if I take the color readouts here, I have 54 for the red, 33 for the green, and 30 for blue. So my point was to create distinction, and moving only this one slider, correcting the white balance with the Kelvin slider, allowed me to create this distinction. Let's again see before. So if I click on the Kelvin slider, so everything was flat, and it looks as we were just picking through sort of brown colored glass. So after correcting the white balance, this is still sort of middle point, but now we can see the possibilities that are out there, and we can try to bring out the potential that is in this image. I have no idea what sort of result would be visible in Adobe Camera Raw in 2012 or at that time's version of Capture One, but right now I'm quite happy with the result I got with the white balance correction. Okay, so this gave me my beginning. This was the starting point. Here I have introduced just one layer. If you follow me for a while, you know that I love working on layers, and I have hardly ever less than 6-7 layers. I prefer to perform every single adjustment on a separate layer. This gives me a really high level of flexibility and control, so I can always try and manipulate with the opacity for every layer, and I see what every layer is doing to the image. So this can be really helpful. So on this layer, I've been working with curves. So I've been working towards adjusting luminosity, and I've been using both RGB and the Luma curve. So let's just pull this one out, and let's take a look what I've done here. What I really love about the tools, and in particular the curves tool in Capture One, is that you can pull it out, you can make it really large, and you can be super precise. If you compare this tool, if it would be just small here, I'm going to just do this very quickly. So let's create another one, add tool curve, and we will have it at the bottom. So if you would like to adjust the black point, this is the very first point here at the lower left corner, it is so much easier to manipulate, to move it very slightly upwards or downwards, and these sort of very precise operations, they affect the image very strongly. So it is important to bring out this tool and work like that in comparison with this tiny little tool that I have over here. And I'm still working on the 27-inch iMac. If I would be on my tiny laptop, then this would be basically impossible to use. So this is just my tip for you. Make the tool as big as possible, and you can always reduce it and work that way. So in terms of luminosity adjustments, I've been working with both RGB and Luma. On RGB first, I have created a sort of S-shaped curve, but it affects mostly my midtones and shadows. And remember that this is a low-key image, so we don't really have any data here in the middle of the graph. You can see that it is very, very flat. We have plenty of dark tones. We have this massive peak of information here to the left. Then it's going down. We have plenty of dark midtones. We have just a bit of this sort of middle midtones. We have no neutral midtones. We have no bright midtones, and we have just a bit of highlights, which is represented by this peak of information here. So if we would be manipulating with the curve in this area, in this section of the graph, it wouldn't make any difference to the image. So that's why my control points are quite densely positioned here to the left, and I have created just one here to create this matte effect. I didn't want to have any strong, harsh highlights. I didn't want to lose texture in the highlights. So if I zoom in, so if I go back to the initial position, this will make those super strong highlights here in the forehead area just more harsh. And that's why I have lowered this point. That's why I have adjusted my white point. So I forgot now what was the value. I think something around here. Okay, let's leave it like this. So adjusting the white point lowers the contrast in this image, and it is, I would say, more soft, more feminine. So this is what I've done on the RGB layer, and in terms of Luma, I've been playing around with these points as well. So here I have introduced this control point, and I actually pushed it down to introduce more contrast. It is crossing the diagonal line, and the next one is correcting the curve. So this is what I've done with my RGB and Luma curve. I haven't used the separate curves for red, green and blue channel. So I've done the whole color grading with color balance, but we'll move to this in a second. So Luma curve, RGB curve, and this is the image. Let me just minimize the tool. So this is before the adjustments with luminosity and after. So even though the image was taken at night and I had this harsh contrast for these very deep blacks, deep shadows, I've decided to make it softer. And I would like to mention here that working with such imperfect images is sort of freeing. At least this is how I'm feeling about this sort of images. I don't really care when I'm working with this sort of files if I'm performing these adjustments in a correct way or in a correct order. This is what I was missing recently, this total freedom and being creative and trying out these tools, because they are at our disposal. We have them here, but we are chasing those sort of perfect images. I don't really care with this photo, and I've been enjoying this process a lot, and I hope you will enjoy watching this video as well, and you will try to copy this approach and incorporate it in your workflow, because I'm sure you have some of these imperfect images, and it would be really a shame to throw these images to the bin if there is something, this energy, this sort of magical vibe that you really like. So let's keep playing around. So at this point I have my white balance corrected, I have my luminosity levels corrected, so this was my starting point. This is what we are at right now. So now I've decided to just break all the rules and jump over to Photoshop, because why not? So I wanted here to correct the line of her chin. I really love these very dynamic lines, these angles, the way her limbs create this beautiful dynamic composition. So we have these very strong lines created by Christina's legs, by her arms, her forearms, and here this very nice neck and chin. So I've decided to jump over to Photoshop and see what I can do with this image. So here we are in Photoshop, and let's just see. So this is my image after the adjustments. Okay, different software, different keyboard shortcuts. And this is the image before, so original and after the adjustments. So I've been playing around with the liquify tool. I have corrected the shape of her chin line. I've been correcting a little bit of the lines of the arms. So again, this is before, this is the after. On this top layer, I have darkened this bottom right corner. I've done this after I finished, in fact, the color grading in Capture One, because this was bothering me. When I have applied some of the tricks that I'm going to show you in a few minutes, this bit got really bluish saturated and it was catching the viewer's attention. So I've decided just to mute it down a bit that way. So this is what I've done in Photoshop. Few minutes playing around, having fun with the liquify tool. So at this point I've just hit Command S and this saved my TIFF and it appeared in Capture One. For those of you who are not familiar with round tripping to Photoshop, just a quick tip. So this is a raw file, NEF, this is raw file from Nikon. So if I would like to jump over to Photoshop, all I need to do is just right click over this image. Let me do this here. So right click on the image and select this one, edit with, and here you can select Photoshop. So once you select this, this will open your TIFF file here in Photoshop. You can perform all the adjustments that you like. You can do whatever you like here. You can play around with colors. You can run the skin cleanup, whatever your image needs. And then all you need to do is to just hit Command S and this will save your 16-bit TIFF here in Capture One. So you can click on the TIFF and you can continue working from there. So let me show you how the image looked like before. So right after saving my TIFF, in terms of color, it was exactly the same as the TIFF that we have here in Photoshop. So this is the before stage and this is the final result. So let me just quickly walk you through all the steps that I have performed here. So let's just switch off these layers and let's take a look. So here on my background layer, I haven't done anything. I've created this layer where I have introduced a bit more contrast with curves, but then I decided to switch it off because it didn't work after I created all these further steps. I'm getting this question very, very frequently. So people ask me, oh, it seems so easy for you that you are performing these adjustments from the beginning till the end just so smoothly. And this is not true. I'm taking a lot of creative decisions and I'm just not showing you all those decisions that were not right. To make these videos as short as possible, I'm just showing you the steps that I've decided to keep that take me from the beginning until the end. I'm not showing you all those directions that I've been trying out and they simply didn't work. So that's how it is, and this is actually the whole beauty, the whole joy, and that's why we call it creative process. And another important thing that I would like to mention here is that I'm able to follow this workflow because I'm working on my personal projects. That would be entirely different story if I had a client and if I had a list of requirements. So they might say, okay, we are selling here the dye for the hair and she has to have the hair with the exact shade, or we are selling, I don't know, the tattoo studio, whatever, you get the point. So then you have to keep this in mind and you are working within these requirements. You need to meet them. And what I'm doing, this is just complete creative freedom. So that's why I can play around, I can introduce these really weird things and I can get away with them and just have fun. So, going back to the edit, on this layer I've performed the luminosity adjustments that I ditched in the end, so let's move over to the next layer. So on my master channel I've decided to introduce this very strong cyan color cast, and this is to mimic the way the neon lights would affect the subject. So I didn't like this strong contrast and those sort of warmish skin tones because we don't really have this nice clean color for the skin tones, and I wouldn't like to go in the direction of typical adjustment of making them cleaner, more warm and contrasting with the background. So I didn't want to inject, let's say, cyan in the background, make it cool and contrast them with the skin tones. This wouldn't work in case of this image. So I've decided to go entirely different route and introduce this really cool light. So this is on my master channel. When it comes to the shadows, I went for quite strong magentish tone for the hair, so this brings up the color of the hair stronger. So this is before, this is the after. So as you can see, I've departed the original tones very strongly. I don't go towards enhancing these warm tones that were present here. Instead, I went really creative. So we have the cyanish color cast, we have magenta for the shadows, we have blue for the midtones, and when it comes to the highlights, I wanted to make the light that was hitting her here very cool. So we have this super clean cyanish tone. When it comes to luminosity adjustments, I've done nothing on the highlights, on the midtones, and nothing on the shadow. So I was playing around only with colors. So this is the color grading layer for the image. Let's make this one actually a bit bigger. So this is my color balance before and after. And here I have 3 layers, and I'm sure you will be laughing when you will see what I've done here. Basically, I've been playing around with gradients, and I've decided to introduce quite strong color with these gradients. And to get this strong color here, I've been working with white balance. Yes, so this is the first gradient. I've just created it here at the bottom. If I hit M, this is the overlay for the mask. So this is my linear gradient, super simple, and I've decided to just introduce some blue to the image. I've done this by manipulating with the Kelvin slider and the tint slider. So let me show you. This is before and this is the after. Then I've created the second gradient. This is for the middle. So my idea was to create one warm gradient here in the middle of the image for the skin tones for the face, and add one more here from the top. This will be the third gradient, and again go crazy and introduce some blue cyanish light. On this layer, if I hit M, you will see the overlay, but I have used eraser to adjust the gradient. So with the third very strong gradient that is starting from the upper right corner and going diagonally towards the left edge, I'm introducing this very strong blue light. So again, this is before, this is the after. So it affects the backgrounds. That way I'm creating depth in this image. I'm creating color contrast between these warm tones, between the hair, the face, and the background. So this is the contrast between cold and warm. Plus it affects the face, but I'm fine with this. This is exactly what I was talking about before. I've created this sort of neon light. If there was a cyanish bluish neon outside on the street, and if it would be flashing, that would affect her like this. So the hand is blue and a bit of the light, of the blue light, is hitting her forehead. So again, this is before and after. This third gradient is created straight with this tool, no adjustments. Only the middle one here, I've took eraser and I removed it from this corner because it was clashing with the blue. So this is what I've done in this image to basically make it more interesting and to turn away from all these weak points, all these imperfections. Of course, I was not being able to remove the noise, but I hope that by creating this effect, the image holds the interest and still the beautiful dynamic composition is there. So I've done few more steps here, and before I jump into them, if you are enjoying my videos, if you like this channel, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to this channel, if you leave me a like under this video, and if you leave me a comment. I'm always reading your comments, I'm always replying to all the comments under my videos, and I really love this dialogue, this mini community that is creating in this channel. I like people discussing between themselves, and really the whole point is to inspire you, to make you enjoy the edits, to make you have fun and to learn new things. So if you leave me a comment that you got inspired, I will be super happy and it will make my day. Okay, let's move further. So on these two last layers, on this one, I've created a bit more contrast. So again, before and after. Let's find my curve tool. So, okay, it should be here at the bottom. Here it is. Let's just see. So apart from the first curve that we've been adjusting in the previous image from this workflow, so this is the raw image, as you remember, here we've been adjusting contrast as well. Then we've jumped over to Photoshop and we have saved TIFF. So now on the TIFF you won't have any of these adjustments available anymore. This is sort of stage number one. It is closed and it is not available for further adjustments. You are getting the TIFF, you can work on it in Photoshop, and on top of these adjustments that you've done in Photoshop, you can continue working in a non-destructive way in Capture One, but you don't have access to these initial adjustments performed on the raw file anymore. I know it may sound complex and complicated, but this is really straightforward. So once you start playing around that way, you will really get grasp of it very quickly. So on this layer I bumped the contrast a little bit. I haven't touched the Luma curve, so only the RGB, and this is the contrast. On the very last layer I have introduced a little bit of sharpening, so let's just jump over here, and to assess sharpening, let's zoom in. So now I'm at the magnification level 100%. We can go even further, so this is 200%, and I have already applied the film grain simulation. This is one of the tricks that help to get away with the extensive noise, and this is always applied to the background layer. So if I just move over here, I can switch it off because I've added this at the very last step here. So first I have applied a bit of sharpening and I have added film grain. This was not present on this layer. The film grain simulation, as I've just mentioned before, it will be always applied to the background layer. There are certain adjustments, not many, few of them that will always be applied to the background, so adjustments like film grain simulation or black and white adjustments. This can be always applied only here. Okay, so going back to sharpening, I have introduced a bit of sharpening. This is before, this is the after. So to get a bit more definition here in the hair, just a bit in the eyelashes. But as I said before, the focus is just wrong for this image because I have her knee sharp in focus and the arm. But let's not get discouraged with these little imperfections. Let's keep playing around. So I have been applying some sharpening, and to make this image a little bit more harmonious, to even out these different areas, so we have the extensive noise here, the noise is visible in the background. This is very quick, easy trick to apply film grain. And don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you that you don't need to care about the good exposure and so on. This is super important, but just in case, if you decide to play with image taken 20 years ago, this is the way to go. So this is my film grain. I've decided to go, let's say, maybe for silver rich, and let's go for quite strong value here. We can experiment with granularity as well, so this would be the strongest adjustment. This is way too much. Let's zero it out, so the default value is 50. Let's go just a bit more, or we could try a different one. Let's go for harsh grain. No, this is not working. In case of this image, let's try tabular. This looks nice, so let's maybe again reset the impact, so 0, and let's try to add a little bit of this film grain simulation. So this basically helps to make the image looking less digital, and this is it. So this is my last layer where I have applied the sharpening and film grain simulation. So I hope you like the final result. Let's just display these 3 images, one beside another. So as you can see, the final result is quite dramatic. I had no idea where I would take this image, and to be honest, I would say that there could be many different creative ideas for this picture. I've departed really far away from the initial color grading. It could be taken in the other direction. It could be taken to play around with these warm tones that would suggest really strong sunlight and entirely different atmosphere. So as always, sky is the limit for your creativity, and this is what I would like you to take out of this video. Don't get discouraged if you are working with really bad images, if you are just starting out, if you are learning, or if you have some really poorly exposed images from the past. Let's give them a go. Let's try them out, because I would say that I'm really happy with this final result, and this is something different in comparison with the images that I've been working on recently. So again, I hope you have enjoyed watching this video at least as much as I've enjoyed working on this edit. Thanks for watching, and remember to check out the free masterclass. The link is available down below in the description to this video. Thanks for watching, and see you by now.